Hey guys, I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're ready to do a deep dive into more society's issues and problems, and perhaps more importantly, some possible solutions. And please ignore any of the background noise or anything that you might hear. Just don't necessarily have the ideal quietness that I always want, but anyway, we're just going to go ahead and jump in. We got about 20 plus minutes, maybe a little bit more. I didn't really actually time this thing, but it does cover a fair bit of ground. And like I said, I think the best part is actually we end up talking about what I believe could be possible solutions to some of this stuff. So let's just jump right in. The title's a little bit odd. It's The Best Way Forward is Backward is the title, and it'll make more sense as we jump in. So all right, let's get into it, and we're just going to cover ground. I'm going to take a water break here and there, but and then of course at the end, you guys put in your well thought out comments as you always do, and yeah, we'll just have some fun today. All right, so the best way forward is backward. I know the title seems a bit contradictory, but just bear with me. It will make more sense shortly. In the last video, I read a piece I wrote entitled "The Emptiness of Modern Life." If you have not listened to that, I strongly recommend you do so, because that video and this video actually go together. In the video, The Emptiness of Modern Life, I talked about how the modern world, with all its conveniences, distractions, and rabbit trails, can actually have a very harmful effect on us as human beings. It can really damage our connection to reality, to other people around us in real life, and to God Himself. I believe that in the rush to move forward, in the rush to progress, that in certain ways society has actually regressed. We have actually gone backwards and not forwards at all. Simply put, despite all the amazing advances in technology and other areas of modern life, society has lost its way. And very much like a man lost in the woods, society goes this way and that way, searching for the way forward. But the best thing a man lost in the woods can do is retrace his steps and actually go backwards, the way he came. This will give him the best chance of finding his way out. And thus the title, The Best Way Forward is Backward. Hopefully the title is starting to make a little more sense to you now. I believe that a big part of the problem is that we as a society have all but completely abandoned the things that made the human experience good. This is not a completely new thing, by the way. Back in the old days, there were societies that disconnected in different ways as well. They did not have modern technology helping them disconnect, but they still found ways to build societies that left many of its members isolated, lonely, and forgotten. So in that sense, this is not a completely new thing. But I don't want to start into that discussion. We can save that for another time. What I want to focus on in this discussion is another great problem in our society, in our country, and after we examine this problem for a little while, we will switch gears and talk about what I believe is a viable solution for this problem, and the problems we have discussed prior to this. The next big problem that we are facing as a country is a failing system. I don't think this is any secret. Our current system is failing, at least here in the United States. The dollar is losing value at a rapid rate. The cost of housing, food, cars, and practically all the things we use in our daily lives is soaring out of sight, and simultaneously, we are struggling with rising crime, rising mental illness, rising depression, anxiety, and loneliness. To put it quite bluntly, a dark black cloud has spread across our once great country, and its dark shadow is enveloping all of us. I believe we are teetering on a precipice. And no matter what your views are, I think that one thing is clear. This society is in a crisis. That being said, I believe there very well could be a silver lining in this dark cloud. It is my hope and prayer that this crisis leads to real and lasting change for society. I hope people will turn their focus toward their relationships with God, turn their focus towards building real relationships in real life, and last, but certainly not least, I hope there will be a return to the land. I hope people will begin to disconnect from the complete reliance on the current system and instead turns towards God, turn towards family and friends, and towards self-sustaining lifestyles, self-sustaining communities similar to the tribes of old, communities where the young take care of the old, strong take care of the weak, the healthy take care of the sick. In short, self-sustaining communities, able to take care of their own basic needs, water, food, shelter, and each other. I strongly believe this is the best blueprint for society to move forward. I understand that not everyone would want to be out in a rural area, but this same blueprint could be applied to new subdivisions and even apartment complexes. All that would need to be added is a bit more land to each community built, enough room so people can grow their own food, power their own houses with solar or some other self-sustaining method, etc., etc. In short, it is possible to create self-sustaining communities both in the country and in the city. There are certainly many different ways of doing this, but as long as the end goal was met in each situation, a self-sustaining and thriving community of people, I would think even the most pessimistic person would have to admit that communities like that would be far superior to our current way of doing things. I actually think doing this with tiny homes makes the most sense, because it would allow people to actually be able to afford a shelter, have a bit of land, just say a regular sized city lot per tiny home, and live in a way that is actually sustainable and not be on the hamster wheel that the elites of society have created for us to run on until we are dead. I understand that there are many people who are so brainwashed that they will never stop running on that hamster wheel. The elites have been dangling that large carrot, aka the American dream, in front of us hamsters for a long time. And just for the sake of fairness, there was a time when that carrot was actually attainable. The average hamster could jog on his or her average hamster wheel for a reasonable amount of time, and then that average hamster, aka the average working class man or woman or married couple, could receive that carrot. And instead of jogging on the hamster wheel, then they could perhaps just reduce down to a light walk, and at the age of 62 or 65, somewhere in that vicinity, the average hamster could retire with not too much stress, barring any apocalyptic life events such as disease, a horrible accident of some kind, things of this nature. Barring those things, the average hamster could expect to drift into retirement, get off the hamster wheel, get out his or her tiny golf clubs, join the country club, buy an RV, tour the country, take up fishing, take up rock hounding, join the Elks Lodge. In short, whatever the average hamster wanted to do, the hamster could do in retirement. Not a lot of worries, paid for house, paid for vehicles, some investments doing quite nicely. The golden years were actually pretty golden for many hamsters, so it made all that jogging on the treadmill earlier in life seem a lot more worthwhile. Fast forward to 2024, and a much different picture emerges. Now, instead of a nice light jog on the hamster wheel every week, many of the hamsters are running as fast as their wee little legs can go, and there's smoke boiling off the wheel. The wheel bearings are squealing in protest, and the massive carrot bobs to and fro in front of the miserable little creature as it tries desperately to get that same carrot its parents attained with only a light jog on the wheel. It's a very humiliating situation this modern day hamster finds him or herself in. The fact that he or she cannot run fast enough to actually attain even a bite of the big bobbing carrot is humiliating enough. But to add insult to injury, the frantic little animal is being yelled at by the hamsters that already received a carrot, back when the wheel actually had a little resistance. Back before the elite hamsters greased the wheel so thoroughly, it now spins with no resistance whatsoever. Unfortunately, for the modern day hamster, many of the hamsters who already received their carrot fail to see that the modern hamster wheel spins far faster than the one they jogged on. And as a result, they sling insults at the little hamsters running as fast as they can and getting nowhere. Then to add to the chorus of insults, the elite hamsters, the actual ones dangling the carrot in front of the wheel, they chime in as well. And of course, it is in their best interest to do so, because their extravagant lifestyle depends on all the little hamsters running at full speed. They have no interest in slowing the wheels down. They will use whatever tactics necessary to keep the hamsters running at full speed. Guilt, shame, moving the big carrot closer to the wheel, giving the little animal false hope, then slowly pulling the carrot back away from the wheel, sending the hamster into a panic and causing it to run faster than ever before. The methods really don't matter. It's the results the elite hamsters are looking for. Every hamster running inside every wheel as fast as possible. That's really all the elite hamsters want to see. I realize there are some who will adamantly disagree with this analogy, who still think the way forward will somehow be magically presented on a silver platter by the very people who botched the entire operation with their rampant greed and narcissism, the so-called leaders of the free world. So they either pin their hopes on the current batch of greedy narcissists, or they say, oh yes, it's bad now, but when this incoming batch of greedy narcs gets in, then it will be better for sure. I'm generalizing here, obviously. Not everyone in politics and government is a greedy narcissist who cares nothing for the average citizen. I understand there are a few good ones sprinkled in here and there, but they are the minority and not the majority. The main point is this. The system we have all lived under our entire lives, that system is in crisis, and how or what or who did the damage is almost irrelevant at this point. Pointing the finger and identifying all the primary suspects is only somewhat useful at this point in time. And it is only useful if those people can somehow be removed from the positions of power and leadership and actually replaced with people who have good, built-in moral compasses and real integrity. The likeliness of this kind of power shift happening at a broad enough level to actually change the direction this country is headed in seems very low in my opinion. The damage has been done. Our once great country is just a tattered ship, just a shadow of its former self, and that tattered ship is barreling full speed ahead, straight into the side of an iceberg. Unfortunately, it is the general population who will have to pay the heaviest price. We are already paying a heavy price. The runaway inflation is wreaking havoc on all hard-working Americans. We are being decimated by the high cost of housing, the high cost of rents, the high cost of food. These are just the basics of human existence. That's not even mentioning the high cost of fuel and the vehicles themselves, or the rising cost of health care and health insurance. I could go on and on. But do I really need to give you a full list of all the things that cost a lot more today than they did in years past? I really do not think I need to hand anyone a list of those things or go into a great detail about just how miserable things have become. We are all living it at one level or another. For some, it is much easier. If they are in a position where they already have a paid-for house, car, etc., then it is not as severe. But it is still a major concern. We all have to eat. We all have to deal with medical expenses at some point. There are still plenty of expenses that never go away. So yes, that is a better position than most, but it is far from a secure, worry-free position. And then there's the vast majority of the population who are not even close to that better position. A whole lot of people paying high rents, high mortgages, high car payments, high everything. The reason I say all these things is not to point out the obvious. I say all these things because I strongly believe there's a silver lining in this dark cloud. I believe there's a golden opportunity for us as a society, as a country, and as everyday working Americans. There is an opportunity for us to make a major shift as a society, moving away from the current system and moving towards a much better way of living. A way of living where communities sustain themselves, grow their own food, provide their own power, perhaps even make their own clothing or even some of their own tools, etc., etc. Of course, It would be up to each community how far they wanted to take it, but I would say that at the very least, these communities should be able to produce their own water, food, and power. This all may seem like some novel idea, but it really is not. People have lived in this fashion for thousands of years. It's the modern way of life that is strange and bizarre, and quite honestly, not good for human beings as a whole. The old way of life, the more tribal way, the more small communities working together way, that way of life was practical, and it was good for everyone involved. It did not leave millions of its citizens rotting away in isolation, stuck in some random room, in some random city, completely alone and isolated. It did not leave the elderly abandoned in nursing homes or isolated in their houses as the rest of their family spread across the country chasing the great carrot, the great American dream. Those types of things did not happen in the tribal settings. Groups of people simply lived and worked together. The young took care of the old, the mothers and fathers took care of the children and babies, and they also had help from other members of the tribe. The strong hunted, fished, and farmed, and the weaker members of the tribe did what they could to help the tribe as a whole. I'm not saying that their lives were perfect, or that this way of living does not come with its own set of challenges. There's no such thing as a perfect life. We live in a fallen world, and no matter what each society decides to do, what each individual decides to do, there is always going to be challenges and roadblocks to overcome. So I'm certainly not saying this is a utopian way of life. But, and this is a big but when you take these two different ways of life and you put them side by side and you compare the two, I think most people would be shocked by just how much social dysfunction, behavioral dysfunction, mental and spiritual anguish, loneliness, anxiety, depression, lack of meaning, lack of purpose, lack of community, and a host of other mental and spiritual ills that arise from these environments created by society itself. Of course, it's natural that many of us would have never thought too much about all this, or questioned it all that much. After all, this is how it's been ever since any of us can remember, and the only thing telling us that things are off is the gnawing voice inside us, our natural God-given discernment, that deep knowing in our hearts, minds, and spirits that tells us something is wrong. Something is terribly off in this modern world we live in. I'm experiencing this awakening for myself for the very first time, putting it into words for the very first time, speaking it out for the very first time. It has only been in the last few years that I have decided wholeheartedly that I am fully ready to separate from the normal way of life, opting instead to forage on a different path, implementing these concepts into my life and actually living this way. I'm not all the way there yet. I still have one foot in the current system and one foot in the alternative way of life, the off-grid community way of life. It's not an easy transition, but in my opinion, it is one of the only ways an average working class American actually have a shot at a better life. I believe once a transition is fully made, that the benefits to my mental, spiritual, and physical health will be immense. I am already experiencing that to some degree. On my section of the property, there is a little creek behind the area I cleared. I like to go there and just sit by that little creek, listen to the water rush by, listen to the birds, smell the fresh air. It is a good place to write, to reflect. It is a good place to do videos as well. I've done a handful of videos there. I'm not always on the property. It is located a fair distance from my in-town location. My in-town location is where I stay when I'm working, and then I spend a lot of the rest of my time on the property. Eventually I will be on the property full-time, but as I said, right now I'm making the transition, and I'm not quite sure how long it will take before the transition is fully complete. I am willing to share some of this journey with you guys as things progress. I think some of you would find it interesting and even beneficial if any of you start this journey for yourselves. Nothing would make me happier than knowing this channel is helping people in a complete way, helping people to have better connections with God, with family and friends, with the land, with life itself, just living a better existence than the sad existence so many are experiencing in this cold, distant, modern world. I'm no expert in off-grid living, but I have learned a few things over time. And one of the things I've learned is this: off-grid living can be and should be very simple, especially when a person is first starting out. I think the average person would be surprised at just how simple life can be. It is only when people get so hyper-focused on having luxury, every luxury known to modern man, immediately implemented into their off-grid living situation, that things suddenly become very complicated and very expensive. It takes a mind shift. It takes some deprogramming. We have been programmed for years to believe that all our modern conveniences and luxuries are not conveniences and luxuries at all, but the bare essentials for human survival. After all, how can any of us survive without a 3-bedroom house, 2 bathrooms, fully furnished, fully powered by electricity at all times, running water available at all times, even walking around the corner of the house to fill a bucket with water because the kitchen sink is temporarily out of order is seen as a nightmarish ordeal and horribly traumatic. These years and years of programming need to be challenged and dealt with. If a person is going to actually be successful at starting into the off-grid living life, otherwise there will be a lot of self-imposed misery and whining involved all throughout the transition. And that is just the completely wrong mindset for making this lifestyle change. I have experienced this at a personal level. I am more of a product of society than I care to admit, and I have caught myself on more than one occasion thinking I needed my long-term goals to somehow manifest in the short term. The off-grid life is a process, and the place to start is with the simplest and most cost-effective methods. I think the problem with a lot of the off-grid channels is they are showing people off-grid living situations that are years and years along, with fancy solar power systems, water systems, food systems, nice living situations, etc., etc. And yes, all those things are nice, but they certainly are not necessary. And I believe it is misleading and discouraging. It makes a lot of people feel like they just cannot do it unless they have all those fancy off-grid gizmos and gadgets. In my experience, it's always best to look for the simplest, most straightforward, most cost-effective way to just get set up on the land, get a simple shelter setup, simple water system, even if it's just storing water in 5-gallon jugs, simple hole in the ground for a toilet, etc., etc. The better systems can come later. The most important thing is to just start into the transition. There's a lot more that can be said about all these things, but for the sake of time, I will end this video here. I would like to do a video about some of the things I've done to get started in the off-grid lifestyle, along with some do's and don'ts for getting started and keeping things simple and cost-effective. If any of you are interested in that kind of video, please feel free to say so in the comments, and as always, feel free to share any of your thoughts, opinions, or personal experiences related to the topics discussed. Alright, that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed writing it. A lot to think about, a lot to digest, and yeah, leave your thoughts, comments, and all that good stuff, and we will meet again in the next video. God bless you guys.